Right. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking the time out to join us this evening for tonight's virtual panel discussion. Tonight's event, Celebrating Pride in Big Rapids, is organized by the Big Rapids Social Equity Initiative's Community Engagement Committee. I'll be your host this evening. My name is John Epley, and I'm the chair of the Community Engagement Committee. I want to extend a very heartfelt thank you to all of our committee members for all their hard work over these past few months to bring these panel discussions to you. This will be our last panel discussion for the summer. We will come back in September with a full schedule, so please stay tuned and please keep participating. I got a cat behind me. I have a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. First, if it is not your turn to speak, please keep your microphone muted. And when you are called on to speak, you can unmute and have your turn to ask a question. And second, if you do have a question for our panelists, please enter it into the chat feature and do not use the raise hand feature. We will be asking audience questions at the end of our program after our panelists have a chance to talk about all of our prepared questions. We are excited to host an insightful and engaging discussion on a topic that is important to our community. We welcome your participation and encourage you to ask questions of all of our panelists, but we want to keep this discussion to be an inclusive, safe, and inviting event, and ask that we use respectful and sensitive language, both verbal and nonverbal. Should there be any offensive or insulting language or used or displayed, we do have the capability to mute you and exit you from the meeting. So, so far we haven't had any complications, but please, let's make this a very civil discourse. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to our wonderful moderator, Antoinette Epps. Take it away.
Good evening, everyone. As Jonathan mentioned, I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening, and also want to thank, in particular, our panelists. We have three wonderful, distinguished panelists this evening. What our format will be, I will introduce each panelist, and after I introduce the panelists, they will have a few minutes to give some introductory remarks, and then I'm going to go on to the next panelist and so on. And once everyone is introduced and has given their remarks, then I'll ask the paired questions. Each panelist will answer the question in turn, and we will start with a different panelist each time. So nobody has to go first all the time, Sarah, because we usually do it in alphabetical order. So I want to start by welcoming Sarah Doherty. She is the coordinator of the Ferris State University LGBTQ Resource Center. In addition, she works with LGBT communities, BTQ communities. In the past, she's worked with communities at Cornell University, Portland State University, and Arkansas State University. She has over 20 years of experience in community organizing and community building, from starting a high school association to organizing students when she was at Cornell, activism with the Boston Lesbian Avengers, working with disability arts movement, and her Master's of Social Work program in Portland. She also worked with immigrant justice movement in Grand Rapids. She co-founded the Grand Rapids Area Mutual Aid Network in COVID-19, and is also on the board of No Lose, a queer and transgender fat liberation organization. She's passionate about bringing people together to make concrete changes and to move us towards justice and liberation. She loves to make spaces where people can feel seen and held and valued as their full selves. Welcome so much, Sarah, and I'd invite you to give some introductory remarks.
Thank you. I was not actually aware that I was supposed to prepare introductory remarks beyond preparing for the questions, so this is very exciting for me. Let me just say I'm really excited and glad that Big Rapids is hosting this, and that the community is invested in having really important conversations about equity, diversity, inclusion, what that actually looks like and feels like in a day-to-day way. I'm excited to hear from the other panelists. And I'm just really excited that this is happening, and that this is happening during Pride Month, so we can grapple with some stuff and work on making Big Rapids even more fabulous than it already is. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And that was fantastic. So, Tirzah Price is our second panelist. She is a freelance writer. She's a young adult author and a native of Big Rapids. She's a graduate of Ferris State University and holds a Master's of Fine Arts from Vermont College of Fine Arts. She has many years of community experience in between working with artworks and serving on various committees. She also worked at Great Lakes Books and Supply and spent 2 years on the Big Rapids Community Library staff. In both her professional and personal life, she is an advocate for the LGBTQ+ rights and representation. Tirzah, if you would have a few words.
Thank you so much for having me. I don't have a lot of words, but I just want to say thank you. And I'm excited to see so many of you here. This is a great group and I'm looking forward to chatting with you all.
Thank you so much. Much appreciated. As I said, really happy to have everyone this evening. And our next panelist is Bonnie Wilson. Panelist Bonnie Jean Wilson officially turns 40 today. So, boop, the champagne, yay for Bonnie. Happy 40th.
Thank you.
It seems like 40 was so long ago, but alas, you get to have yours now.
Yeah. Thank you.
She's lived in Big Rapids for about 9 years. She was raised in Charlotte. I'm assuming Charlotte in North Carolina.
It's Charlotte.
Charlotte. Okay, so that is in Charlotte, North Carolina. Okay.
Yeah, Charlotte, Michigan.
Charlotte, Michigan.
Yeah.
I did not know that was pronounced that way. Thank you.
Yeah. Sure.
After her adoption, she's married to a hetero cis man. Together they have 4 boys, some of which see themselves on the LGBTQ+ spectrum, but all are allies for the community and other important communities like the Black Lives Matter movement and women's rights. Bonnie is a cis female, while yes, she's married to a straight man, she is not straight. She is polyamorous, hyper pansexual. She was a school bus driver until recently. Now she's working for herself, trying to get her property ready for her dream of the future, which is a place where the LGBTQ+ community can gather, rest, be loved, and find peace. Welcome, Bonnie, and you can have a few words if you would like.
Thank you. I don't have all the fancy stuff that goes with my name. I'm just me, Bonnie, turning 40. And the LGBT youth are just really important to me. I grew up that way. I never felt like I had to be in the closet, so they've always just mattered, and I'm so excited that Big Rapids is taking steps forward to create a space for everybody eventually. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for those comments. And thank you to all of the panelists, as I said, and we will proceed. We'll start the first round of questions. The first question will go in turn. After I ask the question, we Sarah, then Tirzah, and then Bonnie. The next time it'll be Tirzah, then Bonnie, then Sarah, and so on, okay? So the first question, sexual orientation and gender identity are often used interchangeably. Could you define or explain the terms and what distinguishes these terms from each other? And as I said, we'll start with Sarah.
So I have been doing LGBTQIA 101 education for a pretty long time, and we used to say sexuality is who you want and gender is who you are. But as time has gone by and as the trans community has moved the conversation forward into more nuanced places, and as intersex folks have also been building power and momentum, we can also say actually sexuality is who you are, gender is who you are. They're all based in social constructs around gender, which are, so if you're thinking about gender, it's not real. It's real, but it's not real. It's one of those things that is a system that people have put in place to make sense of how they're understanding the world. So bodies are bodies, and the way that different cultures ascribe meaning to bodies changes from place to place, changes over time. So we have a system of gender in the US, in dominant culture in the US, that says there's men and there's women, and then there's maybe maybe people remember that intersex people exist, and that's ascribed to sex, but it's mostly based on what people look like on the outside, and people's internal experience of gender is for everybody, it's personal, it's internal, it's based on things like experience and hormones and chromosomes and things and experience in the womb and experience as a person in the world. And so it's complicated, but it's also pretty simple. Like, understanding gender can be hard for folks, but when somebody says, here's my gender, here's the language that's available to me, here's how I'm going to identify myself, so this is my gender, then we can everybody can just say, okay, cool, that's your language, we'll use that. Maybe we'll understand it, maybe we won't understand it, a little bit doesn't matter. And then sexuality, similarly, the way that in US dominant culture we organize sexual orientation, sexuality is around what are the gender or genders of people that you're attracted to. And since gender is sort of so complex and ever changing, and we're getting more and more nuanced understanding of how people are doing gender, that also gets into sort of complicated space. But this is another space where, like, if people say, here are the words around sexuality that describe my experience over time, or my experience of attraction, or my lack of attraction, then this is another place where just listening to what people say about their sexuality is helpful. And sort of how we move toward a more welcoming space is just sort of listening to where people are at. So I don't know, does that work as a complex but kind of simple answer, right? Sexual orientation. So, like, my gender is cisgender woman. I was assigned girl at birth, and I basically am fine with being perceived as a woman, and I'm basically fine with saying, yeah, sure, that lines up with more or less how I experience the world. And also, I'm attracted to women personally, so I identify as a dyke, I identify as queer, I'm fine with lesbian. These are all words that work for me, but like sexual orientation, like I'm interested in women, and I have a long-term female partner. And also I'm queer, so I'm not interested in all women in the same way. I'm not interested in straight women for sure. I'm interested in other queer people. And like that also gets a little bit like complicated and fuzzy. And like part of how I move through the world is in a political way. So my identity and my sexual orientation are aligned, and also because of the ways that queer sexualities are stigmatized, my experience of sexuality is not something that I can separate from my experience in community and my experience with stigma. So like, it is both very simple and complicated by the social conditions I'm in. So that's a long answer for sort of a kind of simple question, but I hope that's helpful. Let me know if not.
I feel like it was helpful, at least it was for me. So, and I really thank you for taking the time to go into the entire explanation. I really appreciate that. Tirzah?
Yeah, Tirzah. Yeah,
Tirzah?
so, yeah. I mean, I think Sarah really gave a very thorough kind of explanation into like how complex these issues are. And one thing I would like to add on to that is, you know, sexuality and gender identity and expression, like oftentimes, you know, some people I think see it as like, well, this is one thing and then this is the other thing. But a lot of people also see it as like this very complex sort of interconnected thing. And just because somebody says like, oh, you know, this is how I identify, I mean, Sarah did a really great job of just explaining that like that what that means for one person doesn't always apply to like the next person you meet who says like, oh, I'm a lesbian. It's complicated, which is not the easy answer. And I know that it can be intimidating for a lot of people who are just, you know, still learning and trying to understand. I mean, even as a member of the, you know, queer community, I also find it sometimes very frustrating and complex. But just, you know, taking the time to be open and understanding about how people want to communicate, you know, how they identify, what language they want to be used in regards to them. That's all very important. But yeah, I mean, I'm also a cisgender woman. I tend to identify most easily as most comfortably as a lesbian. I like the term queer because I think that it's, a nice sort of umbrella term that doesn't have to like get into the specific nitty gritty of identity, and it allows for a little bit of flexibility. But not everybody's comfortable with that word. So again, like if you're talking to somebody, just kind of let them lead with that in regards to that. But yeah, I mean, I consider myself a lesbian, but I'm married to somebody who's non-binary. So some people might be like, well, if you were really a lesbian, but that's, sort of gatekeeping BS that I don't subscribe to. So being open to listening to how people identify and understanding that, definitions are important, but like they should not be boundaries or limits, and just taking people where they're at is important. So that's, I think, all I have to say on that. I'll pass this on to Bonnie.
Yes, and Bonnie?
I think they both said it really well themselves. Because I live with only teenage boys, dear Lord help me. We kind of simple things down pretty far to get people to understand. When I was a teenager, I was bisexual. I didn't have the word pan until now. And of course, then I was one thing, and now that I'm an adult, can make choices on my own. That sexuality, that's when that comes into play. And gender, for me, gender is, okay, I was born this way, and then I'm perceived this way. There's so many layers, there's so many levels to it all, that all we really have to do is be like, oh, like they said, like Sarah said, this is your language, this is what you want, and I care enough about you to try to meet you on some level so that you can be who you are and not be afraid. And that, sexual orientation changes and grows. I mean, like, we all know that as we grow older, that those preferences are going to wane and get stronger and change that. And we have to, like they said, it's not a boundary, it's just a guideline to understand a little more about where that person's coming from. So
thank you very much. Tirzah just pointed out that the evolution over time, the point that you just made about the evolution over time is extremely important. And I think we all should keep that in mind. That's an extremely, no matter how you identify, I think we all can agree that we have evolved and changed over time. Yeah. And that will be true for individuals in this community as well. Our next question. Do you have any tips for people who might feel awkward or uncertain about how to use other people's pronouns? And why is this significant? So we'll start this with Tirzah.
So, well, it's significant. I'm going to answer that part first because it's significant because it's a sign of respect. It shows that, you respect other people, you respect how they want to be addressed. I mean, if somebody's name is Philip and you come up to them and say, hey, Phil, and he says, actually, I don't like Phil, could you call me Philip? I think most of us agree that like the socially appropriate and polite and nice thing to do would be like, oh, okay. And then you call that person by their full name. Pronouns, it's really, I mean, in my view, it's the same thing. Like, this is how people identify. It's not their preferred pronouns, it's their pronoun. I understand that can be a little bit intimidating and difficult and maybe confusing for some people. But we use, I mean, just to talk about they, them, we use they, them as a singular pronoun a lot in English language. If somebody drops their wallet, you don't say, oh, hey, a person dropped their wallet. You don't say a person dropped his or her wallet. It's something that we do all the time. But I think when, we're putting this focus on it in terms of like people who are non-binary or just, however they identify, they want to be using those pronouns, people kind of tend to like, I don't know, freak out a little bit like, oh, this is going to be so hard. But it is something that we can retrain our brains to do relatively easily. Like as I mentioned, I'm married to somebody who is non-binary. They use they, them pronouns. I promise you the switch for my brain was not that difficult. Like it maybe takes getting used to, but practice is key. And you can practice, in conversation, but like practice in your mind too, like just getting used to it. And, if you mess up, I would please beg people to not make a big deal out of it. Just say, oh, I'm sorry, correct yourself, move on. I think a lot of times we tend to feel like really self-conscious, like, oh no, I used the wrong pronoun, and we want to make a big deal about it. And I don't really think that's necessary. I think we can just, correct and move on. And then was there one other thing I was going to say? And it's like completely dropped out of my brain. But pronouns, it is something that you can really retrain your brain and just ask people. If you're uncertain, ask. Putting pronouns like I put mine in my little name here, she, her. I would also encourage people, even if you think your pronouns are obvious to other people, just pop them in there in your email signature, in your day-to-day life. If you're introducing somebody, what it does is it normalizes it for our society, and that makes queer people feel safer, especially if people do use different pronouns other than he or she. I know that one instance is I went to the doctor's office and I was updating my contact info and adding in my emergency contact. And I said, I would like to put my spouse's name as my emergency contact. And the person behind the counter said, well, what's his name? And it made me feel really awkward, to be honest, because then that invites this whole conversation of like, oh, do I explain? Do I have to come out to this person? Like, are they going to understand? And I think like, especially if you work in a sort of public facing service, like just getting into the habit of not assuming things about people's gender and their pronouns and gender expression is like a really great and inclusive thing. The they, them pronoun is really wonderful and flexible in that way. So that is my little soapbox about pronouns. I will pass it on to the next person.
Bonnie?
Yeah, so I have dear friends we all have friends that are in transition or don't really look prefer their whatever that they look, and all you like she said, just try the best you can, identify, we're all human, we all get that, just identify the best you can and move forward. And if you make a mistake, don't make a big deal. That's more embarrassing to our community than anything else. You don't want all these people all of a sudden drawn into this big debacle of someone saying the wrong pronoun. Use they, them, use their name. If you have a hard time, like it's a name, just use it. Like, I'm Bonnie. It doesn't matter if I'm a she, her, we're not taking we're not doing anything. So it doesn't matter. So I'm Bonnie. Hi, my name is Bonnie. You can call me whatever you want, but don't make a big deal. And my friend Wyatt in the back is cleaning off the caterpillars off his house. And that's what the youth community have been telling me, is that, like they're still being picked on, they're still being forced to make choices that they shouldn't have to make, because of these pronoun problems. Just use their name, try to use their pronouns, and when you mess up, move forward and say you're sorry. That's all we care about, but there's a huge problem still in that community in the schools, because I just found out today through my friend Kayla Doyle down in Grand Rapids that when they do the count days, if some kid puts on his paper his not assigned gender that's on his paperwork in the school, he doesn't count. And then so our school doesn't get paid for those kids. The kids who say I'm non-binary, or I'm a boy and not a girl now, or they use a different name, it changes things. I'm not a school person. I don't know, that's above my pay grade, but that's disappointing, because they don't exist in the way that we say they have to exist, that they don't exist at all. It's like, no, sorry, that's not right. Just, we all exist in whatever form we want to exist in. Say you're sorry, move forward, try your best. That's my soapbox.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. Sarah?
I know that like in my experience of encountering offices or forms, one of the things I look for is, has this place imagined that there are queer or trans people who might come through the doors? Have they even conceived of our existence? And looking to see if there are places for people to self-identify gender or specify what their pronouns are, or non-exclusionary language around partner or partners. Those are things that I look for in terms of like just assessing, what's this going to be like for me? What's this going to be like for people in my community? Knowing that sometimes people are going to be great even if the form is terrible, and sometimes even if there's a form, even if folks are asking what's your pronoun and trying to be respectful, that doesn't always, it doesn't often translate into people having their pronouns and names respected in a consistent way. Even when people are trying to be inclusive, a lot of the times cisgender privilege and cisnormativity, cissexism, what that looks like in practice is people are misgendered either maliciously or thoughtlessly. And I know that this is a new conversation for some folks, but it's also really not a new conversation for our community. So consideration around pronouns, imagining that there are queer and trans people in the world, and then trying to rebuild your spaces so that we can just exist is work, but it's the work of a whole community. So it's work that we can all take on together. And let me put in a plug for the LGBTQ+ Resource Center at Ferris State. We are here as a university department to serve the entire university and community. So if I can provide you with some resources, connect you to folks who could talk that through, do a training, that's part of what I do in my job. So I'll leave that there, but I'm going to put some practicing resources, some further reading in the chat. There's a really great website called practicewithpronouns.com where you can literally practice using pronouns that are unfamiliar to you in a website in the privacy of your own home, and just like get more comfortable with using all the kinds of pronouns that people use in the world. So yeah.
Thank you for that, Sarah, and do share that resource. I think everyone would be happy to know that that's available to us. Our next question is asking that you tell us what are some of the unique challenges for individuals who identify as members of the LGBTQ+ community in the Big Rapids area. And this time we'll start with Bonnie.
Can you repeat the question? I have a friend that just got here and she was saying happy birthday and I was distracted.
What are some of the unique challenges for individuals who identify as members of the LGBTQ+ community in the Big Rapids area?
Well, I mean, this is the question I've been like waiting for. Yes, I have the ideas. So when I moved here almost 10 years ago and I started my job, I had to start the rumor about myself being some type of gay, just so that they would stop the derogatory remarks, so that I felt safe enough to even start being who I was around people. And so we need places for these people, my people, our youth, to go to have a safe place. In other towns, they have rainbow houses or spirit houses, which is what I'm trying to do. And, you know, to get those resources and be around like-minded people, and those are my friends in the back, and be safe and be around kids, people their own age, and find people. Like, I don't know how to be gay. My parents were straight. Like, we have to be around each other to know how to do it. Not do it, but like, you know, like be who we are. Like I was a single female and I have male children. I don't know how to teach my male gay child to grow up to be a good gay man. So we have to have resources. We have to have a community center or places to go so that they can interact. And like this COVID thing have blown all of our kids out of out of whack and nobody is talking to each other. And so we need more places for that marginalized youth, because that's where our LGBTQ kids are going for the support. And they're not going to learn what they need to learn out there, and they're not going to be safe. I am so afraid when I send my kids to school. They're not all out and proud, but they're like kind of out and proud. But you know, it's not always a safe community for us to be out and loud. And like, I want to be able to send my kids to school and know that even though they're different or weird or eccentric, that they're going to be safe there and on the buses and at different events and events that like acknowledge their uniqueness and the gifts they have to bring to the community. And so I don't know. Lots of kids running around. I'm distracted now. So.
Okay, thank you so much, Bonnie, and we really appreciate you sharing your birthday with us. That's above and beyond. So we really thank you for that.
Yeah.
Sarah?
Well, so I don't live in Big Rapids, and it's by circumstance, but it's also on purpose. Big Rapids is a small town. Big Rapids does not have a large established LGBTQ community, and it's part of my job to establish more spaces and try to help move at least the Ferris community forward around LGBTQ inclusion and overall fabulousness, right? But like, I hear consistently from people who do live in the community that it's not super comfortable. So I live in Grand Rapids with my partner, and I have access to queer community that way, and I drive up to work and then I drive back, and it's not ideal, but like I know that it's a challenge. It's been a challenge for folks who are commuting, and it's a challenge for folks who are living all the time in essentially a small, pretty conservative space where folks get stared at or harassed out in public sometimes, where there are questions about, are you doing gender right? Am I going to be welcome in this business? And how much is somebody going to be harassed in any given restroom? And those are concerns that happen everywhere. And the difference is really, like, when it's a small community, the strength is in relationships. And if the community decides we're going to care about and value our LGBTQ community members, as opposed to the thing that makes it a little bit easier sometimes to be in a bigger city, which is just sheer numbers of folks and availability of opportunities. So like, I know that there's some tension there, and I know there's some tension around like having your LGBTQ commuting staff not living in the community, and that doesn't help, but it's just sort of an ongoing struggle, right? To figure out how do we make Big Rapids a place where people can really thrive and not feel so alone. And I feel like, I don't know, I'm trying to do a lot of listening to what are the students going through, what are faculty and staff going through, what are community members going through. And I am hoping that this is a way that more folks in Big Rapids can consider, like, what are we doing in an everyday way to make it clear that we do care about LGBTQ people, that LGBTQ people are already here and important and valuable, and also facing some challenges around especially harassment and exclusion. And what do we need to do in our relationships, and what resources can we leverage from the university, from the city nearby, like to make things a little easier for folks, right? So.
Thank you very much for that. And Tirzah?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I think I have a slightly different background and perspective than both Sarah and Bonnie, and that's, not to say I'm disagreeing with them at all, because everything is very unique and it's tailored to the individual. I grew up in Big Rapids. For the most part, I feel very comfortable here. I feel very comfortable going about my day. But, you know, if you were to look at me in Meyer, I think you probably wouldn't assume I'm queer. And so unless I'm like wearing a big, huge rainbow flag. So I have a lot of privilege in being able to go about my day and go about work and throughout the town without anybody, you know, necessarily harassing me. The same is not true for a lot of people who are queer, who look different, whose gender is not immediately apparent. For trans people wanting to use the restroom. So you know, that is always something to keep in mind, that like, just because some people have it, you know, relatively easy, I mean, it's not always very equitable for all of us. And then, you know, I also feel a lot more comfortable here because this is my hometown and I grew up here and I have a lot of community connections. And I think a lot of people don't even, you know, and not until I was married did they realize like, oh, you know, she is queer. So that is kind of like an interesting sort of space to exist in, because I'm very fortunate in that I have not been harassed, but yet at the same time, I have seen how it is difficult for people who are not from Big Rapids or who don't necessarily have that privilege of kind of passing as cis and straight to try to live here. It's not easy. I know a lot of people who do move away from Big Rapids. There's a lot of like systemic reasons for that. And then there's a lot of social reasons for that. And it really kind of, you know, it's hard for me to see. I would say that, I mean, yes, one of the biggest challenges is that I think that community connection for LGBTQ individuals. I think there's a lot more queer people in this area than anybody in this Zoom room probably realizes, except for, you know, those of you who are here who are also queer and, you know like all the underground sort of connections that I'm referring to. But yeah, I mean, like I remember being in a book club and somebody was like, oh, I feel bad, you know, for queer people in this town because they have to like leave in order to have a life and meet people. And I was like, I'm like right here. And she had no idea. And like, you know, not to like, you know, shame this person in any way, but like, I think one of the most dangerous assumptions a lot of like small town communities can make is that, you know, oh, there are no queer people here. Like just because they're not out to you doesn't mean that, you know, we aren't still here living lives. And so that kind of like goes back to, you know, what I was talking about with like pronoun use, and like, there are so many things that you as like straight cis people can do to make your community more welcoming for like those invisible queer people that you don't think are in your town. And like when you create these spaces where we feel comfortable sharing who we are with you, like I think you will find that there's a lot more of us here than you think. I mean, I know a lot of LGBTQ plus people who live in Big Rapids, like a lot, and they choose to live here. They choose to be business owners and they choose to have kids and buy houses and just, you know, be here for a lot of different reasons. So I think, I feel like, yeah, safety and that feeling of community is a really, really big challenge. And I mean, unfortunately, we do still have, you know, businesses and organizations that don't always treat queer people well. And that is a huge, huge challenge. So I don't know if there's any easy solutions or answers, but it is unfortunate, I think, that, you know, there are people who are queer and they work at Ferris and they don't feel comfortable living in the town that Ferris is in. I get it, but I think that's really sad.
Well, taking a cue from what you just said, while there aren't any pat, if you will, solutions, do you each have any thoughts about what everyone in the community can do to help individuals of the LGBTQ plus community feel less challenged in the Big Rapids community? And we'll start where we left off, Tirzah, if you don't mind. offering suggestions if you have any that might help.
Yeah, I mean, I think that just kind of going back to what we were talking about when it comes to pronoun usage is just, you know, and what Sarah was saying about really looking in your like little micro communities and in the spaces that you are in, whether that's work, whether it's schools, whether it's, you know, church communities or whatever, and just like asking yourself, like, are we inclusive? Like, are we welcoming? What ways could we be more inclusive and more welcoming? And if you're not sure, then like hire somebody to help you understand that, look up resources. I think that is really, really essential. And then on a more personal note, like, talk with your friends and your families, especially if you have friends and families who are not as accepting or as kind or as inclusive as they can be, because I think, you know, hearts and minds aren't necessarily changed by, I don't know, like they're not necessarily always changed by seeing stuff in action in the community. Sometimes it really just takes you saying to somebody like, hey, I care for you, but like the way that you talk about queer people is not okay. And just being really firm with people. I think that especially that goes a long way in a small town where we all know each other and we, you know, but it needs to be a conversation and we need to be really honest. Sometimes these conversations are really awkward and they're hard, but they are important and we need to have them.
And I would like to put a point of emphasis on the point that you just made regarding speaking up when people are being derogatory, non-inclusive, you know, saying things that you know are wrong about other groups, you know, speaking up and letting them know that you don't want to be a part of that. I think that's very important. And I would, like I said, I'd like to put a point on that. Bonnie?
Yeah, I agree. Like, you were saying, we in our house we just say silence is violence. If you sit back and not say anything when you see somebody purposely doing it wrong, or maybe you have a coworker that doesn't quite get it and needs a couple extra conversations until they get it. If you are not doing those things, then you are part of the problem, and you can't claim to be an ally for any of us. You know, it has to be equal, and we all know that equality isn't always fair looking, but you know, it's who needs to be lifted up at the time, you know. And like I keep going back to the youth because it seems like they have their, like the older people, you know, like we can take it, like I don't care, you misgender me, whatever, I'm hot, I'm 40, look at me, you know. But like my kids, I want them to be safe. And so the cis hetero members of our communities need to be the louder people saying, no, you can't treat him or her this way. No, you're not going to do that here. This is no longer acceptable behavior anywhere. And, you know, like there's lots of things we can do. There's so many tiny little micro community things that are going on. You know, like I have my stuff, and I know in town we have that community dog walk. All those are great little, in the farmers market, all those are great little places to start building bigger and bigger conversations. Like make sure that there's an LGBTQ information booth at the market. You know, have somebody from the community going out to the dog walk and like saying, hey, you know, we could do a pride walk for the dogs or whatever. Just any tiny little thing is so much to our community because you're making the effort to like do it. You may not succeed, you know, whatever. Rome wasn't built in a day or something like that. But like, I just want to see our people, I don't want to say integrated because I don't like that word. I want to see us just grow and be a beautiful community of all sorts of different colors and weirdos and people and animals. Like this doesn't have to be this hard. All you have to do is love the person next to you and move forward. Oops, I'm sorry, I love you, I'll try not to do it again, move forward. paradigm shifts. They're not hard. Just do it.
Okay. Thank you so much, Bonnie. Sarah?
I would like for everyone to hear that really tiny things make a huge difference
Yeah.
in how safe and how welcome people feel in any community. I do a bunch of training on sort of LGBTQ inclusive practices. There's lists and lists and lists of sort of basic things that anybody can do, from taking a look at your forms to reaching out to LGBTQ people, paying them if you're asking for labor around education or emotional labor or fixing something for you, but like reaching out to folks who do that work. And there's a lot of folks, and like my office is a resource for the community. So hit up my office if you are thinking about questions of equity. That's part of why we have an LGBTQ plus resource center at Ferris for sure. But also listen to LGBTQ people, make a practice of asking, how are things going for you? What feels good? What should be different? And also understand, I want to say, especially for youth, suicide is a crisis.
It's a crisis.
Youth. It is a crisis. And the more spaces that are hostile, the more cases of harassment or bullying or violence, the greater the rates of severe psychological distress, of self-harming behavior, of suicidal ideation, of really severe attempts and completions of suicide. So I want to say that to this community. And I also want to say the more spaces there are that are affirming and accepting, the easier things are, the lower the rates of depression and suicide. And so on the issue of pronouns, we know from life experience, but we also know from hard data that if there's even one person who's consistently using a trans youth's name and pronouns consistently, the risk of suicide for that youth is reduced by more than half. So that's just one person. The more people who are making a practice and a point of asking after and respecting and using people's appropriate names and pronouns and respecting people's identities, the better things are. And the more families are working on accepting behaviors and checking the sort of family rejection behaviors, also the better things are. I want to also say, like, if you're in a family where sometimes families will reject LGBTQ members, and that is also a crisis. Youth homelessness is a crisis for this reason. That is often coming from a place of families worrying about their kids, wanting them to be safe in the world, worrying about what might happen if they are out in the world that is not always super excited about queer trans people existing, right? Like there's a cost that queer and trans people bear living in a society that doesn't love us all the time. Also, sometimes people are worried about their kids going to hell or older generation members not accepting them. And so sometimes what happens is that families will tell their kids to keep a lid on it. Don't identify this way, don't talk about it, don't behave this way, be more gender conforming, try not to let anybody know that you're queer. And that those things, which are often feel important and protective to maybe parents or older folks, end up actually harming youth. And that damages queer people's and trans people's relationships with their families in a lifelong way, and contribute to things like stress and suicidal ideation and psychological distress, and put people at greater risk for things like substance use disorders and other kinds of self-harming behaviors. And just knowing that, just hearing that, I have some more resources for you around this too, if you all want to have this conversation. Evidence-based, here's how you actually turn that around, here's how you rebuild relationships. But if you know that even coming from a loving and protective place, that kind of move to stop people from fully expressing their identity is harmful, then if you can make a change yourself, if you can help somebody who you see doing that kind of sort of rejecting behavior in their family make a change, then that's also going to be small but really, really powerful. And also, if you can just be a safe place for somebody to say, here's who I am, or here's what I'm thinking about, or here's what I'm trying this out, and I want to see if this feels right to me, but I think I might not be straight, I think I might not be cis. If you can be a person where somebody can experiment and try things out and just be witnessed and accepted and loved while they're going through that process, that's also really powerful. And that's something that every single person can do. So I would say do that, and hit me up for help with any of this.
Thank you, Sarah. I believe Bonnie wanted to say something else.
Yeah, Sarah brought up the community mental health of our community, and that is like a huge disconnect here because of how dangerous it is for them or any of us in the community to live because of the heightened, self-harm and suicide and mental health issues. In our community here, the Big Rapids community, the health department, as much as they try, they drop the ball. And I went through that recently, and I was just so devastated how it failed. And to think of anybody out there, and as desperate as a need as some of us get to be, to drop the ball on that. We got to have more people around. We got to have more resources and networks for them to fall and be caught. I hope to be that, but hey, you're gay, you can come over to my house. You can't do that. You got to play by the rules of society and be like, I'll help you talk to your kid if you want. I'll help your kid talk to you if you want. But there has to be safe people to go around, because the community mental health in all the world right now is just so bad. Like nowhere is a safe place for the mental health, people. And that has to get fixed, and it has to get fixed now, because these kids are literally dying. Our people are literally dying because of this lack of our people caring. I just wanted to add that.
Okay, thank you so much, each of you, for those thoughtful responses. The final prepared question that we have just simply asks you to share with us any activities or events that are taking place in this area that might help generate awareness and promote inclusivity for members of the LGBTQ plus community. Does anyone, we'll start, this time we'll start with Sarah. Do you know of any events that are being hosted that we should be aware of?
So my office offers educational programming year-round that's open to the community. So we have because of COVID, we have a virtual space in a Discord server, which the community is welcome to drop into any of our drop-in programs. We also have some closed support groups that are just for students. So we have one of those running, but most of the programming that I do is open to the public in terms of film screenings, discussions. Right now we have an MSW intern, Jordan Barker, who is here, who is running a weekly program called Queers for Your Ears every Thursday in one of the sort of channels within our Discord server. So if you need some help figuring that out, I can walk you through that. But basically every Thursday at 6 o'clock, we're sitting and we're listening to a podcast, which they're accessible. They have transcripts available, and then having a discussion about what came up in this. How are you feeling? Was any of that new? So sort of pretty sort of low barrier of entry kind of thing. There is also a weekly drop-in. Before COVID, it was coffee house, and I had coffee and snacks, and everybody was welcome to walk through the doors of the LGBTQ+ Resource Center in the University Center. I am hoping to be able to reinstate that safely. We're just not there yet in terms of like the smallness of that space, but we have a virtual version of that. So if you bring your own coffee and you want to just hang out with folks and see what new books have come in, what are people talking about, what music are folks listening to, it's very low-key and chill. We also have a drop-in gaming thing, which like it's pretty unstructured, but that's another community space. So every Wednesday from 4 to 6 is virtual coffee house. Every Friday from 3 to 5 is virtual Friday gaming. And I'm going to say I have set the date of June 27th as a day to have an outdoor pride picnic, but I haven't actually booked any space, so I can't say anything beyond that. But like June 27th, we're gonna do something, something low key outdoors, socially distanced with masks. Yes, so watch the LGBTQ+ Resource Center Facebook page probably, and I'm sort of trying to get everything in as many communication channels as we have, but like basically everything I do other than a very small number of things is open to the entire community. So please take this as an open up invitation to come on down and learn about LGBTQ cultures and histories.
Is there an opportunity to connect that information to the Big Rapids Facebook page as well, so that the information, so that things that are open
Tell me how to do that. Yes.
so that things that are open to the public can be hopefully find a wider audience?
Yeah.
Okay.
Will someone email me and we'll make it happen?
I think
I'll
Jonathan,
make a comment,
I think Jonathan
Sarah.
can probably make that happen.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. So next we'll have Tirzah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I have been in like my COVID cave for the last year where I haven't been doing anything or seeing anybody or going to any community events, much less, accessing wonderful pride events and fun stuff like that. So I'm so happy to hear about all of the things that Sarah has spearheaded and is doing and how much is open to the community. That is amazing. I feel like I don't have anything really new to add to this conversation, except for like, I do know that Big Rapids High School has a GSA because I used to volunteer with them when I was working at the library. And we did a huge book drive for them. So they have books and they have resources. So I really do hope that, that is a great resource for our youth in Big Rapids, because, I'm a YA writer. The teens are very, very important to me, but like it's hard because I think, it's so great that we have these community events and spaces, but I also know that sometimes for certain teens, it's not always safe for them to come to those events. So I love to hear about these virtual spaces, and I do hope that that is one thing that we kind of take from these COVID times, is that we can still have these virtual spaces for accessibility and for privacy reasons and for like a whole slew of reasons. So yeah, yes, I want to get back to in-person events, but having those virtual events kind of continue in some small way, I think is really essential too. So yeah, I'm sorry I don't have any resources because I live in a cave, so.
Well, we thank you for sharing that. Bonnie?
So I have an event coming up, but I am just one little private home, so I can't really put it all out there. But I always said that my bus kids could come to my house someday and have some type of moment there with me. And since I'm no longer doing that, I am having an event out at my house for my birthday, but it's in a couple weeks. And it's kind of a way to get back together and kind of start mushing some of my communities together. And then I hope from there, just 'cause I'm a very spiritual person, I'm hoping to bring like a lot of energy and happiness and love to my property. And then I don't know, maybe I can hook up with a couple of you guys to see how to become like a youth spirit rainbow house or whatever, so that they can come to me. I'm always there. Like, I'll be your mom, I'll be your dad. You need someone to go with you to the bathroom because you're afraid, call me, I'm there. But I have that coming up, and that's the 25, 26, 27. So if there's going to be a pride thing for the 27th, push it off a little so I can go. But it's just an event. I have friends coming to camp. My bus kids are coming to experience the weird that is Bonnie, and hopefully spread that rumor out there that Bonnie exists, that this house exists, that if you need a safe place, you can go there. She'll help you. But it's got to be spread by rumors. You can't put my address out there. I do feel very safe where I live because I live squarely between 2 cops. So no funny business on my property. And they're very lovely, nice, kind, outgoing people. And so like there's no safer place than my property for my kids. And sometimes it's hard for us to leave it. I'm like, I'm not going out there. You have to go shopping. I went last time. But, you know, but we have this community. I have this community, and surprisingly enough, the mill, to plug a couple of local companies, the mill, the bar, the sawmill, Wednesday nights has amazing music, and just the atmosphere of love and acceptance is like everything. Like, holy cow, there's just like oasis in the middle of this town for me to be myself, and I'm safe because there's people there that are watching out for all of us. And like, let that person can be that person. We help them get to where they need to go without anything bad happening. So the mill, of course, Red Fox Market is amazing for support. You know, we're around, the support's around. It's just build it, like actually coming together so it's easier to find, because I don't know about any of these events, all those communities. I just asked my son about the group that's supposed to be in the high school. He's one of the youth. All of his friends are the youth. That he has no idea about it. So we got to get louder. We got to get, I mean, we're kind of a loud group anyway. We need to be louder so they can hear us, because they don't, because he doesn't, they don't, like, I've been here 10 years and I don't know anybody or anything. I just found the mill. I just found these people, because there's no community for us. We have to get bigger. We have to get louder. We have to be pushier. That's what I do.
All right, thank you so much. And I would like to thank each of you again for being on our panel and giving us thoughtful and meaningful responses to the prepared questions. We're at the end of the prepared questions. And now we will be opening up for questions from the attendees for the session. And with that, I thank everyone for being so respectful, and I will turn it back over to Jonathan.
All right, thank you, Antoinette. As always, a wonderful job moderating. Again, thank you to our panelists. So far, we only have one question in the chat here. There was made mention of the Gay Straight Alliance at the high school. The question is, does anybody know if there's anything similar to that at Big Rapids Middle School?
Not that I know of, and I have a middle schooler and a high schooler, and they have never said anything, but I would be a little afraid if it's so out that like the kids would, you know, like, I don't know, like middle school is so weird. It's so difficult, you know. It's like they have to be like secret meetings without being secret meetings, because for a kid to like want to go to one of those things in front of other kids, it can be a little like, oh, they're gonna know that I'm gay or something. You know, not all of them want that yet. Not all of them know that yet. They're just like, the youth need more events where they can be who they are, and more places where they can be who they are, so they can discover those things. But from what I understand, we have nothing at the high school or the middle school, but this has been a weird year, so who knows?
I would also say that a challenge to having things happen in schools is that oftentimes you need a faculty member who is going to take that on, and who's going to be willing to organize it, and who's also going to be willing to really go to bat within the school, and if there are complaints from parents and stuff like that. So sometimes there is not always a person like that to step up. You know, when I was volunteering with the GSA, and when I was you know, chaperoning events and doing stuff with the teens there, I was working with 2 people who I know who no longer work at Big Rapids High School. So I don't know what the state is now. I mean, I really hope the GSA is still running, but if it's not, that's, you know, too bad. But you know, this is why we need more adult allies who are going to be willing to step up, because if there's not somebody in these spaces, you know, create space, hopefully.
I cannot speak to the specifics of Big Rapids Middle School or high school, but I can say, as a person who was a teenager who started a GSA, having supportive adults in my high school saved my life. And I can also say for my just like professional social worky self, we know also from research that the presence of a gay straight alliance or some kind of LGBTQ group in school, even if people don't go to it in large numbers, it changes the climate of the school for everyone. And it also reduces suicide rates and self-harm rates for straight boys who aren't queer, but like it helps with sort of overall climate around how many kinds of ways people are allowed to be. So there's often less bullying, there's less harassment, and things get easier for everyone over time if a school makes an effort and invests in the well-being of both LGBTQ students and also in making space for everyone to be who they are, whatever that looks like. So plug for GSAs, and if we can figure out a way to support that, like, also please get in touch. I would love to help, and I think a lot of us would love to help with that Big Rapids community.
All right, thank you. Don't have any other questions in the chat. If you've got a question, now's the time. Even feel free to unmute and go ahead and ask yourself.
Well, I have to go and party because it is my 40th. But I really like talking with you guys and enjoyed this. And I look forward to seeing more of these and them being out. There is a community Mecosta County sale tomorrow. I'm not sure exactly where it is for the native Michigan plants, and I will be there if you want to talk to me. I would like to hook up with everybody to see if we can get louder and prouder and make the youth know that they're safe with us and the other people in the community are safe and like what we need to do. So you're on it, Jonathan. You give me a call. I know where you live.
I will. Bonnie, thank you for your participation this evening and happy birthday.
Thank you. Take care.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Leave me.
I just wanted to ask, are there
Right.
things you want to see? Are there events or groups, or what do folks want? Do you have dreams that are unrealized that we can come together and make happen?
I have a question. I mean, just like along that line, I've often thought that, you know, it would be great to have, I see all of the things that you do on campus, Sarah, and I always think it's great to know that they're open to the community. You know what I mean? Because I look at that and say, these are the kind of things we should be doing, because you do an amazing job of connecting with people on campus. And even through all of COVID with all the virtual things, that's been, you know, really tremendous. So I would love to see more of the local community participating and just, you know, interacting together in those spaces, you know, regardless of, you know, whether, you know, they're straight, gay, or whatever, but just so it is that alliance community. And that's what I'd like to see.
So I actually have a question. One of the things that for younger people, and this, I think the last comment maybe from Tirzah brought this to mind, but a lot of young people, I think, are questioning. They don't really know, you know, so if we're in a situation where there's an opportunity to interact with such an individual, do you have any suggestions for sort of an approach or how we might deal with that type of situation? And just whomever.
I like to say that it's okay. Like, it's okay for people to go through phases. So if you don't know what label works for you, if you don't know what community you want to be in, if you're trying to figure it out, that's okay. If you claim a word and you try it out and see how it feels, even if you decide that there's some other language or some other way of understanding yourself that fits better later, what you're claiming and living out is valid in that moment. And I would like to ask sort of adults and people who are cisgender and heterosexual, people who are queer, who know exactly what their label is, to just give people some space and some grace to figure stuff out and respect what people tell you in the moment. And if they change their minds, if they figure something out later, also valid. And sort of gentleness and curiosity and openness is the way to go. And we all know how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I just would like to echo that. I think that just knowing and communicating to people that, you know, however you define, whoever you are becoming, like, you are safe with me, you are loved, you are supported, just let me know what you need. And then, you know, just following that up by being somebody that, you know, somebody who's questioning can count on is really important. And just, you know that, like, we don't all have the answers at any given time, but we're all just trying to figure this out, but we can be there for each other.
I sometimes hear people say, like, I don't care who you are, as a way of trying to be inclusive, but like that sometimes feels like, oh, they don't care.
Right. Yeah.
Or like, I don't care if you like men, women, or space aliens, like whatever our Star Trek future might look like space aliens is not, that's not the thing that people are actually like trying to get some respect around. It's respecting the language and also respecting that people may be moving through stuff. That's sort of where you want to go. Not like avoid the more dismissive ways of trying to be inclusive. Or I also sometimes see people say, how about if I don't use your word and I just call you my kid, or I just call you my friend? That's a way of saying I don't want to know about your life. So moving towards, tell me about yourself. What does that mean to you? That's gonna feel better for folks, generally speaking. So that's my professional and like old cranky queer recommendation.
No, but I think that's a good recommendation, because oftentimes I think that people, you know, they're confused. They don't know a lot about like an identity or sexuality. And so they do kind of just default to like, well, I just love you. So whatever is fine by me. And I think that if somebody is coming out to you in that moment or telling you that like, hey, I'm questioning, they don't want, like, yes, unconditional love and support is important, but like they also don't want that dismissiveness about their identity. They want to feel validated, and those responses can feel very invalidating. So that's a very good point, Sarah.
I could chime in on the question regarding being questioning. I think another thing that happens to a lot of people, especially who identify as bisexual or pansexual, is when people from the outside define their sexual content by or their sexual orientation by who they're dating at the time, or who they're seeing. So if they're, in my case, a man seeing a woman at some point, they might look and say I'm straight, whereas right now I have a husband. If they look to me, they might just define me as gay. And I think that can be something that is harmful for people who are either bi, pans, or questioning, to give them a label for themselves instead of just let them experience their own sexuality the way they'd like to express it. So I think that's one thing that Bi Eraser kind of gets handed out a lot from people who are not in the community, and sometimes even from those who are, and really needs to be acknowledged.
Amanda, you have your hand up?
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
sorry, my iPad's being weird. I also wanted to build off of what y'all were saying with like creating safe space for people. And when people say like, oh, I am a safe person, like you don't really get to decide if you're a safe person or not for someone else. I just recently came out publicly as queer last month, and the only bad response I got was from someone who I definitely thought was a safe person, and it turns out she's not. And she kept saying over and over, like, I am a safe person, you know, like, don't overreact and all of these things. And it just really hit me like, no, she doesn't get to decide that. And so I think it's important to, especially with youth, like, or I guess just in Big Rapids in general, like it took me, I'm 26 it took me till now to like publicly come out. And a lot of that is because of where I grew up, which is fine. Like Big Rapids has its good things and it's not so good things, but just like understand that if someone decides that you aren't a safe person, listen to them, and then also try and like figure out, like ask questions. Like if you want to be that supportive person for someone and they decide that you're not that supportive person, don't take it personally. Or maybe I should phrase it like, do take it personally, but in a good way, like in a reflective growth way. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. And, good for you for coming out and being who you are. Thank you. Are there any other questions this evening? All right. Well, if there are no further questions, we'll wrap things up. But thank you to our panelists for participating this evening. Excellent conversation. A lot of good information. I hope a lot of people did a lot of learning. I know I learned a few things myself. Thank you for everyone for joining this evening, taking the time to log on and ask questions and educate yourselves and make everyone feel a little more welcome here. For those who don't know, the Big Rapids Social and Equity Initiative grew out of the Black Lives Matter March that was organized on Fair State University campus 1 year ago today. So I think it is it's happenstance that we planned our event for today, but it is quite fortuitous and really kind of a nice bookend to this past year that we've had, where we've done a lot of good work and had a lot of good conversations, but we still have a long way to go and a lot more to learn to make Big Rapids a welcoming community for everybody. The Social Equity Initiative grew out of that March this time last year and has 3 pillars: the community engagement pillar, which organized this event, public safety, and institutional change committees. If you would like to get more involved with the initiative, please reach out to me or Paula Preby at the City of Big Rapids. I'll also be sure to like our Big Rapids Social Equity page on Facebook and join the group, which is a safe place where you can share feelings or stories or experiences, good and bad and different. Please feel free to join those, and I will post the links to both the pages in the chat here, as well as my contact information. As I'd said earlier, this is going to be our last event for the season. We will be doing some work over the summer to put together a bit of more of a schedule of events that we will release late August, early September. But again, thank you, everyone. Thank you to our panelists. It was a great event this evening, and I speak for all of my co-organizers here. I think this series has been wonderful and really a cap in the feather of Big Rapids. And I look forward to doing many more of these conversations in the future. Thank you to Antoinette, our wonderful moderator. You really do a fantastic job. And with that, I wish everybody a good evening and a wonderful summer. And please stay abreast of everything that we're doing online, and look for our schedule when we come back in the fall. Have a good evening, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks.